You got coaches that no longer coach in certain places. Mike White versus Georgia and Florida. You got a nice situation between two coaches who firmly respect each other, and former NBA caliber and had a great series so far. And Eric Musselman and Cal facing each other this week in Kentucky and Arkansas. And then, of course, you got good old fashioned interstate hate between Auburn and Alabama in the Iron Bowl of basketball. Maddie, it is like rivalry week, big time here in the SEC for several teams. Big matchups. Which one are you the most excited about? I know this episode is cornered really on Arkansas, or not Arkansas, but Auburn, Alabama this week, with Jordan joining the show. But which game are you the most excited about personally?
I mean, obviously, it's always fun when you kind of get those in-state rivalry matchups. Unfortunately, we don't get to see much of a competition with Vanderbilt and Tennessee,
Probably
but
not.
I think Auburn and Alabama is going to be absolutely cutthroat. We're going to see a bunch of fan hatred towards each other. Um, Obviously, Auburn went in pretty hard when Alabama went through their struggles last season. So I think it's gonna be a fun week from an outsider kind of looking in at those two different programs and then kind of seeing who comes out on top. We obviously have a kind of a super team with Alabama and their exceptional offense, but then we have Auburn who plays well on both sides of the ball. So it's kind of going to be one of those, like we talked about last week with Alabama and Kentucky. Will Alabama's offense beat out Auburn's defense, and how does it match up? So I think it's going to be one of the more fun games and rivalries that we're watching this week.
That's a great game. I agree with you. That's why it's our big focus in this episode. 100% with you. The game I'm really interested in is not so much a rivalry between teams, but really a competition to kind of prove who's the best big man in the SEC, and that's Janai Broome versus Tolu Smith with Auburn versus Mississippi State this week. We talked about last year. Auburn beats Mississippi State and Neville, but like the reason is because Mississippi State's guards can't hit a shot from deep at all to save their life last year. This year, that shouldn't be the same problem. Instead, we're going to have this great competition between Janai Broome and Tolu Smith again down low, one that Tolu Smith dominated last year. So I'm curious to see how that matchup shapes up this week. But we are talking about all these great matchups, previewing the Iron Bowl of basketball with Jordan Harper of Tide Illustrated. Great show today here on the Hoop Southbound Show. Before we talk about individual team performances and everything else this week, one day this week just really stood out at the top of the SEC when it came to individual performances. Now, a lot of Alabama fans, when I tweeted this out, about, this Super Tuesday, so to speak, we're talking about, Griffin's performance against Mizzou, but really there were three performances that stood above all else. And that was Dalton Connect against Florida going for 39 points. You had Wade Taylor going for over 40 against Arkansas in Bud Walton. But wait, Arkansas still gets the win with Tremont Mark dropping 35 in the game winner against Texas A&M. I loved these games. These were great. These were awesome, awesome performances for each and every one of these players. I tweeted out at the end of the day that it was Knoxville, Texas A&M, and Arkansas. Where that's how those performances went. They were the game, was watching those guys. But out of all those performances, Maddie, which performance impressed you the most?
Listen, if I wasn't an Arkansas fan with anxiety about the fact that they lost a 20-point lead somehow, I would still be talking and wouldn't be able to shut up about Wade Taylor. I mean, he had exceptional cold-blooded execution that almost won them the game for A&M. After basically being down the entire game at one point for 20 points. He took that game over, and if they would have walked away with the win, I think it's every headline that we would have seen after that game on Tuesday. Granted, Arkansas isn't a great team, and last year I was very high on Wade Taylor. For anybody that watched the show, they knew how excited I was about him and the things that he would be able to do. He's still doing it. He's still here, and I think he is going to be an excellent asset to Texas A&M as they continue to move forward in the season.
Yeah, that shot that puts them ahead, that go-ahead shot that Texas A&M takes with 7 seconds left in the game. He's almost drawing contact in that one to draw a foul. He's going off the screen in a tough situation. There's four dudes like wrapped up in a pod out there outside that three, and he just sinks it. And as soon as he let the ball go out of his hand, I was like, Wade Taylor's making that. Wade Taylor's making that shot. Like that's going to happen. And sure enough, I mean, nothing but net. It's a beautiful shot. It was a heck of a performance. One that any other given night, Texas A&M wins a game like that because Wade Taylor's playing that hard. The only thing that Texas A&M was really missing was like one or two guys really stepping up for them. In that Arkansas game, Texas A&M just had a really bad night shooting and needed other players to contribute. Wade Taylor's performance was amazing, even in a loss. Like it was great. The
If they had
performance,
Henry Coleman,
yeah, Henry Coleman is what's the missing.
100% would have been a win.
Yeah,
And then, I also think if you would have that shot that you're talking about, if you just kind of crop it, put the goal out, it looks like there's no way that ball is going in because of
no,
everything that's going on. It
yeah,
it was magical. It was amazing.
yeah. It was impressive. It was truly impressive. It was a great shot by Wade Taylor. Super, just amazing shot. Of course, Tremont Mark hits that game winner in that game on his drive to the basket with the just seconds time running down. Almost saves Arkansas' season. Arkansas still a mess after their loss to South Carolina, but that was a moment maybe you were going to circle that shot and be like, this is the moment. It still
Mhm.
hasn't happened. We're going to see where Arkansas is after this week, but that's probably why neither one of us are really talking about Tremont Mark's performance is because of the aftermath so far is still not paid out yet. But the performance I was most swept away by was Dalton Connect. It wasn't so much just the game against Florida. It's really been to me with the offense that he has produced consistently for Tennessee. Dalton Connect is an amazing basketball player. He has
Mhm.
shot up onto NBA draft boards just the same as Wade Taylor has. He's a great basketball player, and he's showing that he can play at this level. Dalton Connect's legit. That performance against Florida at 39 points, he's shown it. Georgia played a great game before him. Follows the Florida game up with another great performance against Alabama. Dalton Connect has been consistently performing at this high of a level, and to continuously do it every time you break where you're at, it just becomes that much more impressive. And just being 1 point short of 40, amazing game from Dalton Connect. And we're going to talk about Tennessee here just a little bit coming into this next segment. But I was impressed with Dalton Connect and his ability on the offensive end that really takes this Tennessee team to a different level.
Oh, definitely. During that game, I think I tweeted something out like, at the very least, Dalton Connect is a late first round draft pick at this point. He's had amazing offensive production and, you know, takes this Tennessee team to a whole nother level.
Yeah, for sure. I can see it. I can see it. The only thing that maybe works against him is some of the younger players, pushing him further and further down in the draft. We've seen that happen, but maybe he is this year's Colby Brown, who pops up late in the first round, and really surprises everybody. Dalton Connect's been great. The offensive consistency to get Tennessee out of droughts has just been. He's a great basketball player, and to me, that he is the conversation for one of the for the MVP of the league this year, for the SEC Player of the Year. I think he's in that conversation with Wade Taylor as one of the best to be named very soon as one of the very to be named very soon at who's going to win that award for the SEC.
Definitely. And speaking of Tennessee, David, Aaron Torres dropped a little love for the Vols, but also dropped some harsh truths about them. Just quoting Torres real quick. Get that until Rick Barnes wins big in March. Tennessee won't get the credit that they deserve. But if you can't see that this team's offensive firepower makes them different than years past, you don't know ball. To win in March, you need three things: NBA talent, experienced guards, ability to win a number of different ways: high scoring, low scoring, etc. Tennessee checks all three of those boxes. Will they win in March? We'll find out, but they're as capable as anyone. Now, David, I know you like the Vols, but what are your thoughts on Torres' remarks about this team?
Yeah, so I think Torres is hitting the nail on the head. What have we talked about, consistently when it comes to Tennessee? During the preseason, we were talking about like, oh yeah, no, Tennessee's got to make sure that their offense becomes a little bit more efficient, making sure that the shots they take count more often, and they can't go in these long droughts where this team is struggling for 5, 6 minutes, where they're having to get through with it on defense. What Tennessee has shown from an analytics standpoint is that they check the box Over and over again in almost every offensive category, they are better. Their offensive rating is 4 points better than it was last year, almost 4.5. Their adjusted offense is 7 points better than last year. Their points per game are up almost 9 points per game. And then they're shooting a whole percentage better from three this season. And they're shooting almost a additional 3-pointer a game this season. Their offense has gotten a lot better this season, and that's preventing a lot of droughts. And as we were just talking about, Dalton Connect changes this team because he is a consistent bucket. He can find points, and you're avoiding these droughts and these long stretches without baskets where you're just solely relying on your defense. And I want to remind people, that we may be talking about Rick Barnes being constantly a regular season merchant, but what changes this team? Last year, this Tennessee team made the Sweet 16 with an injured Zakai Ziegler on the bench. So maybe Tennessee beats, I believe it was Florida Atlantic who they played. Maybe wins that game, moves on to the Elite Eight, and carries on and makes the Elite Eight last season. How much better would this Tennessee team be with Dalton Connect on it last year? Like that's the
Yeah.
difference. Like, is Tennessee a Final Four team? They're starting to check a lot of boxes. They're starting to check a lot of boxes. They got a top 2 defense and a top 20 defense on KenPom when it comes to who this Tennessee team is. They're the most complete team in the SEC. Tennessee looks great. They're a very good basketball team. Don't get me wrong. Power rankings this week may say Auburn's number 1, but that's because they're undefeated in conference play and have played well. Tennessee is probably the best team in the SEC right now. They're hard to beat, and I think the ability to play better offense is going to set the potential up for Tennessee to go much deeper this season. What are your thoughts on the Vols? Because, like I said, they're checking almost everything you can think of, besides the MTE win so far for what has been the pattern for a national champion.
Yeah, so I mean, you talked about it a little bit when we talked about Tennessee last season. We notated their flaws. They were a great team, but they need to fix a few things. With Dalton Connect and Zakai Ziegler back on the floor, I think you kind of cover those holes that they were missing last year. That they aren't going on droughts like we've seen in years past. Now that we've got an experienced point guard and Zakai Ziegler, I think he's going to be able to lead this Tennessee team much further in the conversation, especially when it gets to March than they have been in years past. They've had the talent, they just couldn't put all the pieces together. You were missing a few puzzle pieces, got lost in the move or whatever. But they're all here now, and I think Rick Barnes has finally put all of them into place.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we talked about the proficiency that Tennessee showed against Duke in that tournament game when they played them. And I believe we were talking about like just some of the inconsistencies that they were having down low at times when it looked at like some of those offensive stretches. Jonas Adu also has played some sensational basketball for Tennessee, and he's showing up just how much of an improved player he is this season for the Vols. The front court's got 3 dudes who are growing game by game: Awaka, Adu, and JP Australia. I mean, those guys are all growing. Australia's probably the furthest down the bench on the depth chart for sure. But Jonas Adu has raised his game to a level that he's hard to compete with. He's putting up double doubles against teams. Like he's playing really good basketball as well. And I think part of it is that when you've got an consistent offensive threat with Dalton Connect out there, it starts opening up other guys to have big performances in different spots on the floor. And I think Adu has been a big beneficiary of that. Not he's raised his game, and now he's getting, good offensive situations to put himself in to pad that stat sheet. He's a good basketball player, and he's helped a lot. Like I said, we're missing, like, I think for Tennessee to truly be a national championship team, what we're missing is just 1 or 2 buckets from guys like Zakai Ziegler, Gainey, and Santiago Vescovi. Just a little bit more, one more bucket a game. And like, you're going to see a Tennessee team that's going to be just dang near impossible to beat. But like, look what they're doing at home. Look what they're doing. Look what they did to Ole Miss, and look what they did to Alabama this weekend. Tennessee is a dang good basketball team. And I'm thoroughly impressed. I am glad that they're the team I picked to win the SEC this year, because right now I'm feeling pretty darn good about that pick, with my current conference champion pick.
Yeah, for sure. I don't blame you there, David. They are looking phenomenal. Another name to be mentioned, I think, is Triple J too. We saw him with the talent last year, and I feel like he's slowly getting more and more consistent with every game. So by the time March comes around, he may be that guy to pick up an additional bucket per game that could lead them closer to that conversation.
Vols are a national championship contender. I am completely in belief of that. I believe this is the year that they at least, at minimum, tie their program's all-time best. At least they get the situation. We'll always see how the bracket turns out for them, but they have the potential to to get into the to at least tie the program's all-time best as an Elite Eight team. This team has the potential to make a Final Four. I believe that thoroughly believe that. And I think if you had a rematch between Purdue and Tennessee, I think you play that game 10 times and it would come out 50-50. I truly believe that. So that's my 2 cents on the Vols. I'm feeling it. But a team who just sucks.
Yeah, there's a couple, but I think I know which one you're talking about there,
Yeah,
David.
the team that everybody, including us, we're really hyped about this season, and have just unfortunately played some of the worst basketball in the SEC this season. We asked on Twitter if this was the worst, or we asked on Twitter, would the 2019-2020 Arkansas Razorbacks beat this current Razorbacks team? That's Eric Musselman's first team at Arkansas versus what is now his fifth team at Arkansas. And we got the results to that poll, and 80% of people said that not only would the Mason Jones led Arkansas team beat this current Razorback team, they would beat them by more than 20 points. Now, that might be a little bit emotional and might be a little bit of a stretch, but when you look at it, this team may honestly not even just on a postseason, speculation with the Razorbacks. This team may truly be the worst team Eric Musselman has ever had as a head coach in college basketball, not just Arkansas, in college basketball. The only team that I think is really like from a numbers standpoint a comparison is the 2015-2016 Nevada team, who also had a very slim points differential between them and their opponents. Had kind of a lower end on ball movement, but that team could probably out rebound this Arkansas team. Maddie, what are your thoughts? And I will throw this out there for anybody who's like, yeah, but that's Nevada. That's out in the Mountain West. The Mountain West has been a better conference than the ACC the last couple of years. So, according to Kim Palm and a couple of metrics out there. So, Maddie, what are your thoughts on this Razorback team and just where they're at?
You mentioned several times the Razorback team. I think what Eric Musselman has is a group of collectively talented players, but they don't play as a team. They don't use those talents to mesh well together, to go out and get wins and kind of have the heart and determination to win for each other. It seems I don't know if that's what it is, but it's something's not working, and I kind of feel like Eric Musselman's given up. I feel like the fans have given up, and for the first like 5, 6 minutes of the game, you can tell if the team's given up too, which is unfortunate. We went to that South Carolina game, and my friend that I brought with me, I apologized. I was like, "Listen, I am so sorry that this is your first experience in Bud Walton Arena because this is not normal Arkansas basketball."
It's not. It's not by any means. This I can't. This is I'm trying to think back to a worse team that Arkansas's had, and I think I got to go back to the Mike Anderson years because I truly believe that none of Muss's teams are worse than this team. None of them. That's not just on where they ended up in the season. Like I think the individual players. Let's go back to what Torres was saying there for Tennessee for just a second. You got to have NBA talent to win. Well, the 2019-2020 Arkansas Razorbacks had Mason Jones, who got a chance to go play for the Lakers, and they had Isaiah Joe, who's currently on the Oklahoma City Thunder. That wasn't a bad team. And they could win in a variety of different ways. They played decent defense. They held their opponents to under 70 points a game. And then, you had guys like, Adrio Bailey on that Arkansas team who would fight for rebounds. And that was Eric Musselman's worst rebounding team. So I think he would grab a couple of boards against this Razorback team. And this Razorback team has more size. So, I'm just not there with this team at all. When you look at the numbers, I'm with you. It does seem like a bunch of individuals. And I think things just haven't worked. But I think this also says a couple of things too. Eric Musselman missed. It also goes back to what I was saying earlier in the season. When I was like, I don't know if Tremont Mark is if you want him as the primary ball handler. I now completely flip that statement because what I now believe is that Tremont Mark is being put in these situations. The reason that you're not seeing all the ball movement, and everything else, is that no one's going with Tremont Mark.
Mhm.
That's really what it is, and it's not the other side of that where or anything else on the floor. It's people are just not going with him, and I think he's kind of like the heart and soul right now of this Razorback team. I think that's really the case with Tremont Mark. Um, if Arkansas did not have Tremont Mark, they wouldn't be in a single ball game. They just wouldn't. And I think that Duke game is an outlier where this team just is desperate and needed a win, and they found a way. But like, as far as if you're put in that situation with other teams, I don't know if it stands that way. If someone else stands up. Arkansas beat Texas A&M this week. Let's talk about that just a little bit, and they played out and played a fantastic first half, one where Eric Musselman went, I don't know where this came from. Where has this been? And, you're really feeling good after that first half. Texas A&M comes back, but they really had to muck up the ball game to do it, make it a mess to make that game a free throw battle, anything they could, let Wade Taylor take advantage of as many possessions as they possibly could. It was one of those where you're just trying to gross up the game as much as possible because you can't make a basket if you're Texas A&M. And then Arkansas just had no one else besides Tremont Mark on the offensive end in that second half, besides maybe L. Ellis, who made some contributions. Um, but then Arkansas comes out and plays bad against South Carolina. How do you, Matty? Why can't this team build momentum either? What do you think that is?
I think it's probably a mental thing. It's got to be because we like you said we saw them have an excellent first half. If you can't build momentum off of a game like that, where pretty much nobody's really expecting you to win anymore at this point, and you come out and prove yourself, I feel like you should have a little bit more egos. Like, yeah, we got this, but I do not know. I think, one of the things after that game, I saw somebody tweeted and said, the must bus is fixed. And I said, whoa, 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 pump the brakes. I said, we got a spare to limp the must bus away, basically, at this point. That is not a 100% diagnosis. It is not fixed yet. And obviously, after that South Carolina game, it is definitely still in the shop.
Yeah, I would say that if you had beaten South Carolina this week, you would be feeling a little bit more confident about your own situation if you're Arkansas, to where you have a pulse for making the tournament. But this is, as I mentioned last week, Eric Musselman has never missed some form of the postseason with one of his college teams. This year, Arkansas, according to one bracketologist I saw, this team has a less than 1% chance currently of making the NCAA tournament. That's staggering how ridiculous that is. No one saw this. No one saw this coming. The floor for Arkansas when we did our preseason was that they'll win 20 games because Eric Musselman has never not won 20 games in college basketball as a head coach. And they will make the tournament at worst case in that awkward tough spot, make the round of 32 or don't, but have to face a 1 or 2 seed, 7 to 10 range. That you didn't quite you avoided the bubble, but you weren't exactly a good team either. It's kind of like when Arkansas had to rework their entire offense last season. So I don't know. Like, this is just not it. And Arkansas has got a chance to get themselves right this week, really save the season with 2 quad 1 opportunities, with going to Ole Miss and then facing Kentucky at home. But do they have the firepower to do any of that? That's the real question.
I don't think they do, but I guess we will see.
We'll see. We'll see. Um, Again, very little faith in this current situation. And again, one of those teams that they're going to be facing for a quad 1 opportunity. College game day is coming to Fayetteville to watch this Kentucky team. My goodness. Okay, so before we talk about this, last week we did not know that Big Z was going to be coming out for Kentucky. So we were talking, our frame of mind really talking about it was we think Kentucky's going to win this basketball game, but Georgia, we're talking about Georgia a little bit and like how, Georgia's got this chance to make this really big statement in their season, really get this signature win they need to put themselves firmly in the NCAA tournament conversation. And then you knew that narrative was completely dead Saturday morning when when Big Z makes the announcement to Big Blue Nation that I'm eligible to play. And boy did he play. Oh my gosh. This was wild, Maddie. Like he gets in there for a grand total of 16 minutes in this game. Sporadically, he gets in the game and puts up ridiculous numbers, making behind the back passes to Antonio Reeves. He's doing crazy things. People are tweeting like, outrageous things like he's already the greatest Wildcat to ever put on Kentucky blue. I'm out there just going along with the fun and tweeting Big Z greater than Victor Wembanyama. Like, it's wild. Just like, what did you take away from Big Z? Because you knew Kentucky was not losing that game once the billboards paid off for Big Blue Nation.
Yeah, I mean, first you had the ridiculousness of Big Blue Nation renting the billboard in front of the in front
NCAA's
of the
office.
office to get Big Z out there. Now that he finally is, we talked a lot about Kentucky defense being a little lackluster. I Problem solved. They're done. They don't have to worry about that anymore because Big Z went out there, 3 blocks, 2 steals. I mean, he only got 5 rebounds, but I think he had potential for more, and that's only in 16 minutes.
It just first off, we gotta all pump the brakes. We're just all falling in love with this. If he follows it up, great, good for him. If he does it again against South Carolina, good for him. I think he was a little bit like excited to get on the floor, just a little bit. Like I think he's gonna be a good player, but like it was also at the exact same time. I think this kid was ready to play some basketball, and he wasn't holding anything back in that first game in front of like anytime the guy touched the ball and did something semi decent, Rupp was going crazy. Like that, they were so excited for this. He played great. He played awesome. You just gotta love it for him. It's like the perfect situation. It's too ridiculous, just how well that went for Kentucky. And like I said, Georgia didn't stand a chance once that news broke out. Like, that was the momentum train being switched on into overdrive and everything else. Like, you're setting up for what you think is going to be a battle and an opportunity for Georgia to make the biggest statement of their season and Rupp Arena, and it's absolutely not. The basketball gods will not have this. And Big Z is playing hoops today.
Dropped some nitro on that train and it took off.
Yeah, they put something in there, like that was just crazy town. Just how crazy that was. Favorite moment of this entire thing. Big Z gets the dunk, hangs on the rim, finds out that way that you can't do that in American college basketball. It's okay in Europe, but he says, "quote I didn't know, I forgot about it." Ivzik said with a big smile. I'm still kind of knowing the rules. I don't know every rule here, so my bad, Coach Cal. My bad. I'm sorry. It's okay for him to hang on the rim in Europe, but like here in college basketball, he can't do that. But yeah, no, let him hang on the rim. Let him. Like this is too much. It's too much fun. It's entirely too much fun. Too great of a moment to not enjoy this if you're a fan of college basketball. Love everything about Zavonimir Ivzics. Get used to hearing that name mispronounced everywhere that you go for the rest of the season because Big Z is here to stay for Big Blue Nation, and it's going to be fun. Really, I can't wait to watch him when he comes to Bud Walton this weekend. That'll be fun. It's going to be a good time. I don't know how anybody's going to keep up with him if he's playing like that. So we're going to see. That'll be his third game in college basketball when we see him here in Fayetteville. But excited for it. It's excited for it. You got so many NBA players on this team. You're just adding another one to this Kentucky roster. It's unfortunate we're only going to get to see him for half a season. Like I wish we could see more of him because like he's going to the NBA draft this year.
Yeah, if we would have seen more of him earlier in the season, I feel like we would have a completely different conversation of where Kentucky's at and where they can go.
You remember when I was talking about is that trend going to break about the top 12 in week 6 being a national champion? Maybe Big Z and Kentucky are the reason that trend breaks.
They'll keep the trend, but put an asterisk. Say except for 2024 because Big Z came back.
Just out of curiosity, do you think Zach Edey could guard Big Z around the perimeter?
Ooh, that'd be a tough one. That'd be a tough matchup. That'd be a fun one to watch for
See
sure.
where I'm going with this? Changes the
Mhm.
team quite a bit. And that
Exactly.
with Welch's offense that they've put together in Kentucky, I mean, I'm just saying that's a very different Kentucky offense, very different Kentucky team. Maybe this is the first team that we've seen in years outside the top 12. It'd be the first time since Syracuse, as we talked about, since Syracuse won the national championship, that a team from outside the top 12 in week 6 won a national championship. Kentucky's got a shot. I think they got a shot. All right, we do need to talk about some serious news today on the show, and that's concerning Alabama. We've had Missouri fans reaching out to us on Twitter and our DMs asking us to talk about this week on the show. Nate Oates on Tuesday, if you haven't seen the video, put his hands on a Missouri player who was more or less in his huddle on a dead ball, and that was Aiden Shaw. Now, this led up because of some chippiness, I'll call it, between the players on the court, and it bled over into the Alabama huddle after a dead ball. Now, Nate Oates has apologized for putting his hands on Aiden Shaw, saying, I have all the respect in the world for the job Gates has done as an assistant and head coach. Oates said after the game, no disrespect to him or his program. I apologize to both Coach Gates and Aiden Shaw. Aiden seems like a great kid. It's an unfortunate situation, but I apologize to both of them. Dennis Gates has this to say, and I think this is a solid point by Gates. Nate apologized after the game, Gates said, but I just posed the question, if that was players in a huddle with a hand on an opponent, what would take place? It would have been an automatic technical foul, right? I thought I saw two referees in the huddle. It wasn't a technical foul, but that's the question I would pose. If it was players making hand contact, that would take place. Greg Sankey has reprimanded Nate Oates, saying Nate Oates' actions were unacceptable and violated the expectations for conduct and sportsmanship as established by the membership of the Southeastern Conference. Under no circumstances should a coach make intentional contact with a student athlete on an opposing team. Now, before we get into talking hoops today, Maddie, and the upcoming week ahead, I just want to comment on the situation. First off, I have no problem with the message that Nate Oates was trying to send. Get out of my huddle. It seems like a pretty fair thing for a coach to
Mhm.
say to a player. The problem was putting his hands on Aiden Shaw, to me, was the issue. And to me, I agree with Dennis Gates. There's no tech here. There's no free throws. There's no whatever. Then the SEC just, sends, reprimands him. But I kind of agree. Like, this should be a technical foul. This should not be allowed. This should be, a flagrant one, or however you want to put it. This should be a penalty on a coach. If you can, I'm just saying, if you can have a coach who maybe drops the F word accidentally while yelling at a referee, the other team shooting free throws for that, putting your hands on a person who is not one of your players, you should also be a technical foul, in my opinion. But I welcome your opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Oates shouldn't have put his hands on a kid, especially from another team. But the act wasn't violent. There was no intent there, you know, for anything more than just to get out of my huddle, like you said. I think if it was more physical, yes, we should be making a huge deal about it. I kind of think it's gotten blown out of proportion, partially because no one's talking about Aiden Shaw instigating it, trying to escalate what was already a bad situation. I think 100% Shaw was instigating, trying to, get something to happen there. But if we are treating these players as professionals now, getting paid to be there, then they need to act like it too. So, not saying anything like Oates shouldn't be reprimanded or anything like this, but also, I think they're shaming Nate Oates a lot more than what's cause for the situation.
I mean, you said it right there, these players need to be treated like or act like professionals do. Professionals start fights all the time. I mean, like we got Draymond Green out here, choke holding somebody. Then you got fights that happen all the time in Major League Baseball, across sports. It's constantly happened. The NFL has it about once a week. I'm just saying, like I don't think it's a matter of acting like professionals. I think you're a coach and they're players. Like there's a difference between which role you take on the court. Coaches break fights up. They don't get in the middle of them and they don't make contact with players who are not their own. I think that's a difference. All right, shifting gears. This is rivalry week in the SEC, and we're joined by Jordan Harper from Rivals and Tide Illustrated to talk about this great week of SEC basketball and, of course, the Iron Bowl basketball here coming up on the Hoop Southbound Show. And we welcome to the show, Jordan. It seems like you've been a little reluctant to come on here the last couple of times I've messaged you. Is everything going okay, over there in Bama land?
Yeah, I reckon so. I mean, coming off a 6 game win streak, and then you're kind of due for a game like that. Not you hope it's not that bad, but yeah, everything's going good. 4-1 in conference. Here locally, we just had a big winter storm hit us, so I've been. Yesterday was the first time I gotten out of the house since Sunday, and with 2 kids under 4, that's very difficult to handle most times. But other than that, all's good over here.
All right. Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, no, I feel you on the winter storm. I didn't leave my house until Wednesday
Oh,
from here. And we got another round coming in up here in Northwest Arkansas with freezing rain. So I'm supposed to get a half an inch tonight. So
it's
good
just
times all around. All right, Jordan, before we talk about this Iron Bowl of basketball, I do want to, we were talking before you got on here as outsiders, but I do want to get some Tide perspective to talk a little bit about the incident that happened with Nate Oates and Aiden Shaw on Tuesday. Just any thoughts really as a Tide fan and kind of how that situation transpired, and how did you feel the SEC kind of handled the situation between Coach Oates and the player Aiden Shaw?
yeah, there's a lot of various opinions out there, obviously, and being an Alabama rider and an Alabama fan my whole life, obviously, I'm going to have a little rosy look on it, but he shouldn't have done it. That's I'm a former coach as well, basketball specifically, and that's just one of the things you don't do is, you can touch your players as long as you're not being too demonstrative, Bobby Knight level, but the opposing players have always been, you leave them alone, and that's kind of been the coach's rule universally. But Nate is a very passionate guy, as a lot of younger coaches are, and I feel like it was probably a heat of the moment thing, and you could tell after the game he ran up to Dennis Gates and really regretted what he did, and you could tell in his press conference he did as well. The reprimand was no surprise. I'm sure there was a lot of pressure from the Missouri side to get some sort of statement or reprimand out there. I'm sure there were suspensions or fines that were warranted from that, and that what a lot of people probably wanted. But really, nothing's going to please everybody in what you do. So they just kind of, since there wasn't a technical call, which was very surprising to me, considering there were 2 referees standing there. I'm sure they were shocked as everybody else at what happened. So they just kind of let it go, I guess. But from my perspective, he's a passionate guy, heat of the moment. Sometimes you let that take advantage of you. Shaw was standing there. I don't know what he didn't look like he said anything. He was just kind of standing in the middle of the huddle, and Nate was getting ready to talk to his team. So he just kind of, it wasn't a demonstrative shove. It was just kind of a get back type of shove. And I mean, that's all it takes to rile a bunch of people up. But overall, shouldn't have done it. Heat of the moment. It's college sports. These are all adults, and now they're paid. They're paid employees basically now. So it's not like if it happened in high school, it would have been a lot bigger deal than what it was that night.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Yeah, definitely a variety of opinions out there. I know that we had Missouri fans messaging us on Twitter wanting to talk about the story, but we thought it was fair to also ask somebody who's in the Alabama world a little bit, also their perspective on it, and not just to outsiders here. Let's talk about basketball, Jordan. Jordan, this week is the biggest matchup so far this season for both Alabama and Auburn, arguably. But I want to start by going back a little bit. The trajectory of both these programs have been dramatically changed within the last decade or so. What has allowed the Alabama Auburn matchup to rise to the profile of this in basketball, and where it's now like arguably the biggest rivalry in the SEC at this moment?
Yeah, used to, even before SEC Network came about, Alabama and Auburn basketball was kind of put on the side burners. When it was Tony Barbie and Anthony Grant, or even back when it was Mark Gottfried. Auburn was fairly decent early in the 2000s, but it's always just been, between Alabama and Auburn fans, it's been a big deal. But nationally, it's just never gotten the recognition that it didn't really deserve any. Based on how mediocre the programs have been for the past, before Nate Oates and Bruce Pearl got here. But now Nate Oates and Bruce Pearl have done such fantastic jobs, not only marketing their programs to higher level recruits, getting those guys in is what propels you up to being a consistently winning program. And they're just really good coaches in their own right. Doing that consistently, in which Bruce Pearl's been there, 10 years now. It was a bumpy start for the first 2 to 3 years, but once he got his feet under him, got his guys in, and got guys to buy in, they've been as consistent as any in the SEC the past 6-7 years. And Nate Oates has done that. He had a more firm foundation that Avery Johnson left him when he came in, but he has kept the ship rolling and kept the trajectory going even further than what Avery Johnson had it. So being able to market your team, have a fun brand to play, being passionate. I mentioned that about Nate Oates earlier. Bruce Pearl is probably the most passionate coach in the SEC. Guys want to come play for that. And where they've kind of collided has been since Auburn made the Final Four. That's when Alabama really said, okay, we got to go get somebody. Let Avery Johnson go. Nate Oates came in. COVID year crashed that party. Alabama wasn't that good anyways. But after that, it's been Alabama and Auburn top four every single year, seems like, battling it out for the SEC regular season championship. And that's really kind of where it's come from, is from the depths of, bottom half of the SEC consistently to both teams being in the top four, top five in contention for the SEC every year. And I think that all starts with the head coach and the administration kind of laying everything out for them and giving them all they need to be successful.
That's totally fair. It's been a totally different atmosphere in the world of Alabama basketball over the last 10 years. And yeah, you can definitely circle that hiring of Bruce Pearl and the hiring of Nate Oates as being a centerpiece to that. Maddie?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, rivalries are obviously so much more fun when both teams are competitive, both having a good year. I mean, we talked a lot about Kentucky Louisville this year, how it kind of slipped off. There wasn't even a rivalry there. But, kind of looking, Alabama's had probably one of the most odd resumes in the upper echelon of the SEC this season. They had 2 low-end Q1 wins against Indiana State, who was probably one loss away from being a Q2, and Mississippi State on the road. So how significant is it that Alabama gets this win against Auburn at home for sake of their resume going into March?
But you have to think that home quad one wins are kind of rare when you think about it, because it's only takes into account the top 30 net teams. And when you think about a conference that has 14 teams and only about 3 or 4 teams that are in that top 30, you might not play all of them at home. And if you didn't get any in the non-con, like Alabama did, which they played the majority of theirs on the road, their big games anyway, it's really huge. You have an opportunity to get in your home gym a quadrant one win, which is going to be probably the biggest win that they could have all year. And to have it at home is a big deal. You can go to 2 games later and get a quad one win at Georgia, but what kind of merit is that going to? It's going to hold about the same weight as winning at home against Indiana State or at Mississippi State. Nobody's going to bat an eye to that. But the metrics love Alabama, obviously. But like you said, their metrics are kind of carrying them right now. And they really need that resume win to where everybody's like, okay, they beat a top 10 team. They're for real, or something like that. I do think Alabama is a top six seed in the tournament right now. I think they're a top 25, 30 team overall. But they really lack that signature win, like you said, Maddie. And With your rival coming in to your home gym, it doesn't get any bigger than that.
I couldn't agree more. And I do want to throw this out there as well. Auburn hasn't won a quad one game yet this season. They're 0-2 in quad one matchups. Auburn's resume is still a little bit less than impressive me. But Jordan, when you look at this game, what is the most significant matchup on the court between these two teams, in your opinion?
It's going to be the front court. And that's where Auburn has a huge advantage with Chad Baker-Mazara, Jalen Williams, Janai Broome. And Alabama just doesn't have the horses if they're going to get into a paint match to where it's just Auburn slowing the pace down. They don't play fast anyways. They play a pretty moderate pace, but if they make it to where they're doing what Tennessee did and just getting paint touch after paint touch after paint touch, it's going to wear Alabama down, not only physically, but in foul trouble. Alabama commits a lot of fouls from their front court. Noah Pringle always seems to get 3 to 4 fouls a game. Muhammad Wagi can only play 10 or 15 minutes at a time. He's injured right now, but he still fouls a lot. And Grant Nelson, you kind of have to pick and choose times when you want him to play the 5 as well, because he's going to get in foul trouble if he plays the 5 too much. And as bad as he's been offensively, he's actually been Alabama's best interior defender all season, especially in SEC play, averaging 2 blocks in a steal a game. But the front court's going to really decide it, I think. Rebounding, that's something that Tennessee dominated early in the game. Recently they were at one point up 9-0 in offensive rebounds, and they got several second chance points to kind of push that lead out and kind of push it out of reach for Alabama. So preventing those second chance opportunities for Janai Broome, Jalen Williams, and I think Alabama has a very good matchup against Auburn in the backcourt. I think their backcourt is far superior. Aiden Holloway is a decent player right now. I think he can be really good. He's still trying to find his footing. Has a great assist to turnover ratio, being 3-1, but he's shooting 32% from the field. So he's not a threat offensively. He can obviously get hot from 3 if you let him. But guys like him and Denver Jones and Trey Donaldson, none of those guys scare me when you're putting them up against guys like Aaron Estrada and Mark Sears. So if you're looking for a matchup, a one-on-one matchup, I'm going to say it's going to be Rylan Griffin against Jalen Williams. I figure that's who they'll put Rylan Griffin on, who's the best perimeter defender Alabama has. Now, he got kind of taken to school against Dalton Connect, which, surprise, surprise, he takes everybody to school, but he's about unstoppable right now. But all season, Rylan Griffin's been a very good perimeter defender. And I think that's going to be a huge matchup because Jalen got hot last year at Auburn against Alabama and in Tuscaloosa from 3. So you can't let them get those 3-pointers off because they don't shoot it well from 3. They're 183rd in the country in percentage, but that's one area Alabama has to dominate from the 3-point line if Alabama's going to win this game.
For sure.
So, Jordan, you talked a lot about the front court. We've seen Alabama kind of struggle with dominant big men. Just mentioned Zach Edey, PJ Hall, Jonas Adu. So how do you expect, as kind of the Alabama expert, how do you expect them to game plan for Janai Broome?
Yeah, it's really going to be tough because they run a lot of high ball screens, which the majority of the country does. So they're going to have to decide: are they going to jump the screens? Are they going to hard hedge? Or are they just going to go back to their old ways and do a little bit of drop coverage to prevent Janai Broome getting position, which is going to open up a lot of mid-range and 3s for them. So you kind of have to play the percentages there to where they don't shoot very well from 20 feet and out. So me personally, I would jump the screen, play a little bit of help defense from the weak side, go cover Broome, and then you're just going to have to leave a guy in the corner and just play scramble after that. You can't let guys like Aiden Holloway and Trey Donaldson come off those high ball screens and get downhill, because at that point Alabama's in trouble. They're going to foul, or they're going to get a kick out anyway, or to get an alley-oop to Janai Broome. So to me, I think they really need to hedge hard, stay true to what they've been doing here recently, and just trust it. Tennessee's just an awful matchup, so I just kind of throw that away as an outlier game just because that hasn't happened to them recently. But I would run a hard hedge on them in the high ball screens and just help off him Janai Brim if he gets one-on-one on a mismatch. I mean, I would just trust that Auburn's not going to consistently make outside shots.
I mean, fair enough. All right, let's go to the picks in this one. KenPom has this game as tight as Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney on Welcome to Wrexham. All right, so they've got this game 84-83 at 56% for the Tide at home. Who do you guys have? Jordan, we'll start with you on the pick. I know that we've had just don't feel any pressure to pick Alabama if you don't want to, because we've had plenty of people pick against their team as guests.
No, if you had me last or on Saturday or something, I would have 100% picked Tennessee over Alabama. So that was the first game I had Alabama losing. I think when we did our little predictions before the season back in September, I had Alabama losing to Mississippi State as well on the road, as well as Tennessee. So I had them starting out 3-2. But no, I really think that in this rivalry, home court has been so huge to where Alabama can rarely win in Auburn. They won once in COVID year when there was no crowd. And then, last year, obviously, when Alabama had a superior team. This year, I really think Alabama and Auburn are really, really similar, really close in terms of talent and how good they are overall. Even though, I wish people didn't care as much about the AP poll as a lot of people do. Because you're seeing like the AP poll in college basketball is useless. If it just pulls a lot of false narratives, like Memphis being nearly top 10, and then they lose at home this past week. I'm like, look at their metrics. I mean, people don't want to look at metrics that hard because I don't know, people aren't anti-analytical, but Alabama and Auburn's always been right there in the top 10, right neck and neck with each other in the KenPom, net, whatever you look at, Torvik. I really think it's going to be a close game, and they're really close. I just feel like Alabama's going to have a packed house for the first time, probably all season. Their crowds have been really lackluster this year, but this Wednesday, I see it being packed out, being a good home court advantage, and I think they're going to hold home court and probably win somewhere around 78-72, 73, something like that.
That would actually be a lower scoring game than I would anticipate. I was thinking 80s also, but yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I wonder what led you to that score? Just curiosity.
I really think Auburn's defense is for real. They're top 40 in the country in scoring defense, field goal defense. They're top 10, and like they're probably going to go with the same blueprint that Tennessee had of playing a little bit physical, put your hands on them, which Tennessee gets away with a lot of hand checks, a lot of off ball holding, especially on their home court. Where they play more comfortably. But I think Alabama will be probably beneficial of a softer whistle or a quicker whistle while they're on offense. So I feel like Auburn will slow them down, but I feel like Auburn's offense is also not good enough to put up 90 or 85 or 80. Alabama's defense is pretty bad, but I just don't think Auburn's going to be able to go on the road and score that much. Especially at Alabama. Now, they didn't even score a whole lot against Vanderbilt on the road, so I don't see them going into Alabama and shooting the lights out either. So I could see it being kind of a slugfest.
Okay, fair enough. Maddie, who do you got?
I'm gonna call Apollo over here because his guess is as good as mine. Like, I have no clue. I think I could flip a coin right now. I feel like it's gonna be a tight game, like Jordan said. I have a feeling it's going to be a little more high scoring because I think Alabama is going to have to beat Auburn with their offense. So Auburn's just going to try and keep up with that pace. But I think I'm going to go Auburn by a very, very slim margin, mainly because we've kind of seen higher rated defenses kind of take over Alabama. The home court advantage is huge here, so it wouldn't surprise me at all if Alabama comes out with a win here, but I'm gonna go Auburn.
I am going to go Alabama in this one. As I've stated a couple of times, there's going to be a couple of losses on whoever wins the SEC's resume this year. I don't think it's going to be an 0-4 or just one loss team this season. So regardless, I think Auburn's overdue for a loss at this point as the only undefeated team left and home court advantage and offense seem pretty favorable for the Tide for me as well. So I'm going to rock the Tide here, same way that I picked last week, Tennessee over Alabama in that one. All right, if Jordan's hanging out with us, let's go on and talk about the other games. We've got two former Big 12 teams facing off. Texas A&M faces Mizzou in Reed Arena. Texas A&M got the win in their rematch with LSU on Saturday in nail-biting fashion, and they also lost to Arkansas and Bud Walton on Tuesday. Mizzou, of course, is still trying to find their first win in SEC play. Who are you guys picking in this one, and why? Maddie, we'll go ahead and start with you, then we'll talk to Jordan.
So I'm going to go with Texas A&M on this one. With the way we've seen Mizzou struggle so far this season, and with A&M kind of attempting to boost their resume after a bad loss last week, I think they're going to be able to take an easy win at home to kind of help pad the stats here.
All right, Jordan?
Yeah, I've got A&M too. I just think they're more talented than Missouri. Missouri is they've been clawing and scratching. They gave Kentucky a decent game at Kentucky. They never went away there. Lost to South Carolina at home to overtime. Played Alabama a really good game in Tuscaloosa last week, and I thought played Florida well as also. But I don't think there's any way they're going to stop Wade Taylor. I think he's going to be too much for that Missouri backcourt, and I think A&M's going to come out with a win.
I would agree with all of you. So let's make it a clean sweep for Texas A&M in this one. To me, they're the better team. But if you're looking for a stat, it's rebounding. Texas A&M is one of the best teams in the conference in creating second chance points. And Mizzou is terrible on the glass, as we've pointed out about a billion times this season. So I'm going to Aggies in this one. Ken Palm has it 77-66 at 83% for the Aggies. Maddie?
All right, let's head down to Mississippi for our next two games. First off, going to Oxford, Arkansas will face Ole Miss in the Pavilion. Ole Miss coming off back-to-back losses last week against LSU and Auburn. So Arkansas was able to get one win last week against Texas A&M, but are coming off a terrible loss to South Carolina in Bud Walton. Ah, man, doesn't get any easier. No matter how
We were there. We know.
Now, in this Ole Miss Arkansas matchup, Eric Musselman has never lost to Ole Miss. In fact, Arkansas hasn't lost to Ole Miss in over 5 years. Feel like David is setting me up for failure with this script today. But what makes this game different, and does the winning streak for the Hogs come to a halt?
I'll go ahead and get us started because I set you up for failure there. Yeah, no, it is. Simply put, Ole Miss has played really well at home this season, getting the wins against North Carolina State. They beat Memphis at home, and then after they got their face beat in by Tennessee's defense in Tennessee, they came home and put it on Florida. So normally they bounce back pretty well when they get back to Oxford this season under Chris Beard. I will say rebound differential is going to be a part of it, but overall, I mean, Ole Miss has played, better than Arkansas in almost every conceivable metric because Arkansas has just not done things well. They have not played to the Eric Musselman standard at all, or what Arkansas fans expect out of Arkansas basketball, going back even to the Mike Anderson years. So this is the worst Arkansas team we've seen in a while. So I've seen worse Arkansas teams go into Oxford and get, trounced. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go with Ole Miss in this one and say the streak ends for Eric Musselman. Jordan, who do you have?
Yeah, I got Ole Miss too, and this is one of those to where if it was in Bud Walton, I would take Arkansas actually, because these two teams, Arkansas is not playing well anywhere. I know that's not what y'all want to hear, but they're not playing well at home. They're really not playing well on the road. But one thing that Ole Miss has had has been a really good home court advantage, a really good home court record. And I feel like that's probably what's going to get Ole Miss back to playing pretty good ball. I don't think Ole Miss is really good, to be honest. I put out a tier list where this morning on Twitter to where they're kind of in the tier 3 of all the teams that can make the NCAA tournament. But to me, I feel like they have a lot more they have to do. They don't have that quality win, in my opinion. So they're going to have to find that somewhere. And they cannot afford a bad home loss to Arkansas for the tournament chances. So I think they'll come back home, and they'll be energized to play and try to get that first win against Musselman.
Jordan, I am very much the same mind to you when it comes to Ole Miss. Numbers hate this team. Really, they have.
Rightfully so. You saw them play last night, and
Yeah.
they lost at LSU as well, and then they got trounced at Tennessee. So at home, everybody plays well at home, but you have to win some road games, and I don't know if they will this year or not.
Yep, you're preaching to the choir to me on that one. Believe me, Maddie.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't obvious already, I'm gonna go with Ole Miss here. Kim Pom, for some reason, is being very, very generous and has this game at 79-74 for Ole Miss, at 69%. I feel like the confidence rate should be a little higher, and the points disparity should probably be a little wider. But I'm tired of talking about how terrible Arkansas is. So David Ball, let's go to the other Mississippi game this week.
Don't worry, we get to talk about Arkansas later. Again, when in this episode. But let's talk about the other big game in the state of Mississippi, and that, of course, is Auburn visiting Mississippi State on Saturday. Really, this week is a test for how good Auburn actually is. Now, we talked about this this offseason. Auburn last year won this game in Neville against Mississippi State, but in that game, Mississippi State could not buy a bucket from deep. They could not hit a three. It did not happen, and Mississippi State kept that game close without hitting any three-pointers. And like I pointed out, Tolu Smith actually took Jani Broom to school in that game. The stats really outweighed Tolu Smith winning that 5-spot battle. This year, these two will face off again in Starkville. Mississippi State has added some more consistent shooting with guys like Josh Hubbard. Kim Pom has this game and what's looking like that fun 60% fun range where upsets like to happen every now and then. Last week, it was Arkansas beating Texas A&M in that kind of matchup range. Kim Pom has this 75-71. Auburn at 63%. Guys, who do you have? Jordan, we'll start with you. Who are you picking in this one?
Won't take Mississippi State. I do not like Auburn away from home. The only two games they've played in SEC play at home are two of the bottom 3 or 4 teams in the conference, in Vanderbilt and Arkansas. So historically, under Bruce Pearl, they're not a good road or neutral site team, especially in conference. That's typically where they struggle. And Mississippi State, it being a Saturday mid-afternoon game, the hump is going to be packed. It's going to be rocking. And they kind of play similar to Auburn. They both kind of butt heads, like you mentioned. They both try to pound the paint with Tolu and Jani. But I like Mississippi State's guards a little bit more than Auburn's. And I think they'll end up making several threes this game. Kind of what they did against Alabama when they faced off in Starkville. They started out on fire from 3, which is, not their MO this year, but they shoot a lot better at home than they do on the road. So I think Mississippi State's going to slip up Auburn on Saturday as well, kind of coming off of a very emotional game in Tuscaloosa on Wednesday.
I feel that for sure. Mississippi State really needs that quad 1 win. Maddie, who do you have in this one?
I'm going to go Mississippi State as well, since I picked Auburn for the Auburn Alabama game. As Jordan said, there's going to be a lot of mental and physical exhaustion because that game is going to be, I think, a nail biter. I think they're just going to go in tired, and they're going to go into a hard Mississippi State atmosphere to play against. So I think Mississippi State's going to have this one. Again, I think it's going to be a slim margin here, probably the 4 to 5 point range. Possibly a last second shot situation like we saw in Arkansas and Texas A&M, but I think Mississippi State's got this one.
Why do I feel like we're setting ourselves all up for failure? We're going against the computer here and everything. And I've got to put my money where my mouth is when I pick Mississippi State's front court as better than Auburn's front court this offseason. So I'm also going Mississippi State at home in an upset win. We all went with the upset. So I feel the trend of the unanimous pick problem about to hit home here because it's going to be hard for Auburn to lose 2 games in 1 week. And we're picking majority. 2 of us believe that Alabama is going to beat Auburn. And now we've got unanimous Mississippi State beats Auburn in Starkville. But let's find out this week. It's gonna be crazy. So I'm saying that there's plenty of room for us to be wrong in this one. But all of us picking Mississippi State. So yeah, clean sweep on that one. Go ahead, Patty.
All right, so next up, Tennessee, staying in state, is going to head over to Nashville to face Vanderbilt this week. We'll go pretty quick here. I don't think that there's going to be much to root for when it comes to Vanderbilt in this one. It's kind of been pretty ugly.
If the theme wasn't rivalry this week, then I don't think we'd be talking about this game.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we know Tennessee is kind of the exact opposite of what we just mentioned about Vanderbilt. But like you said, it's a rivalry. We got to mention it. It's in the title of the show. So, I mean, last season, Vandy had that game-winning shot against Tennessee at home. So it was really kind of the stunner of the year. But looking at Kim Palm, this game's picked the balls at 94% for a double-digit win. Do either of y'all show any signs of life winning a memorial for Vanderbilt on this one?
No, absolutely not. I have no signs of life for the Tennessee's defense is overwhelming, and also Vanderbilt was a more talented team last year to pull off that victory, and they were hot. This team's ice cold, lacks certain players that they need to pull off that victory. Tennessee's a better offense this year, and they less frequently go on droughts than they did in last year's team. I'm sure Jordan agrees with me.
Yeah, if Tennessee didn't have Dalton Connect this year, I would say this might be a closer game because Tennessee in the past 2 years haven't had that go-to scorer like they do with Dalton this year. Like Zakai Ziegler and Vescovy, they're good scorers, but they're not a go-to person. So now, if they go in a drought, they just give it to Dalton and say, go get us a bucket. No, I think the spread will probably be around 17.5, which is really large for a road game in conference, but I say it'll probably be around that, and I say Tennessee covers.
And fair enough. Maddie, who's your pick? We know who the pick is. Yeah. Yeah. Vanderbilt for everybody. All right. Let's get into this one because this is also one of those games that I don't feel like if circumstances weren't there, we wouldn't be talking about it. But Arkansas and Kentucky College Game Day is headed to Bud Walton on Saturday, and we're going to be joining them with our January edition of Hoops on the Road. Tristan Ferris from A Sea of Blue will be joining us for that Kentucky-Arkansas game. Yes, I know we're cheating, but this is year one of this series, and yes, we're going to stick to budget and stay in Fayetteville for going on the road on this. But it's really because Kentucky's there, and you're going to watch about 6 to 7, NBA draft picks on the floor at any given moment. You will not go the first 35 minutes of this game without there being a future NBA player on the floor. It's not going to happen. There's that much talent in this game. Now, this game is between two coaches who have a lot of respect for each other quite a bit. Both Cal and Muss are former NBA coaches. Cal has called Muss one of the best player developers in college basketball, and Muss has basically said the same thing about Cal. There's also that great story between how Cal let Muss know that he was getting fired from the Dominican Republican national team a few years ago. Just a really fun history between these two. But since Muss has taken over Arkansas leads the series between these two teams. And in fact, both these coaches have found more success in the other team's building than at home. Cal beats Muss and Bud Walton in 2019 and in 2023, and then Muss beats Cal in 2021 and 2023 in Rupp. It's given birth to a new era of the Kentucky-Arkansas, not quite a rivalry. Probably the best we've seen since Nolan and Pitino were the coaches here. But Arkansas stinks this year. Who do you guys got? Jordan, if you want to go ahead with the pick, go ahead first with that one.
Yeah, I probably won't go as in depth as y'all probably will, but I will say Kentucky will win this, and I think it'll probably be by 12 to 14 points, if I had to guess, by the end of the game. Kentucky, I was afraid of this because Cal has been stuck under a rock for the past 8 to 10 years, playing a very slow, deliberate offensive system. Now they've sped it up. They're number one in fast break. They're one of the faster teams running and gunning this year. And they've got dudes now with, Reed Shepherd, you can just throw out there on the winger in the corner and shoot 80, 70, 60%, whatever he's shooting from three. And then Antonio Reeves has always really been good. Now they got Big Zeke, the legend. So you've just got so many weapons on this team. You haven't even covered Ahmad Bradshaw, DJ Wagner. There so many guys on this team that are just playing so well right now. And I think that speaks for itself, how they dominated Georgia they dominated Georgia and then they let them back in the game. Same thing they did to Mississippi State. They jump out to 20-plus point leads and kind of let them sneak back in. But I feel like that Texas A&M game kind of woke them up. They were sleepwalking against Florida and Missouri early on in conference play. But they're really hitting their stride offensively, consistently scoring 90-plus points a game in conference. So give me the Cats just because I don't think Arkansas is going to be able to score, over 80 points this game.
Yep, fair enough. Maddie, what are you thinking here?
Yeah, I'm seeing Kentucky grab a pretty easy win here. But that is if we continue to see the same Razorback team that we've been seeing. The only way I see this Arkansas team even getting close and making it a game is if we see that Duke Purdue team that came out and actually put on a show for everybody and played decent basketball that we're kind of used to seeing from this Arkansas team. But that's kind of looking like it's going to be a stretch. So I'm taking Kentucky pretty easily in this one.
Yeah, South Carolina shouldn't have come in and beaten Arkansas and Bud Walton. That's pretty much just my case in point because South Carolina, I'm going to be very clear about this, was not a team that should have come into Bud Walton and win. They're not that good. The thing is that Arkansas is that bad, at given stretches throughout this point of the season. And yeah, they played great against that exhibition game against Purdue, put up 100 points against UNC Wilmington, who's an excellent 3-point shooting team, and beat Kentucky and Rupp. Blah 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 blah. Duke, whatever you want to say about Arkansas, and finding ways to win, and even that Texas A&M game, they find a way to win in a must-win situation. The difference here is Kentucky is an outstanding 3-point shooting team. They have a great offense, and this is probably the worst defensive team Eric Musselman has put on, and they allow a lot of points around the perimeter as well. Even though Kentucky's defense is not the best, it's very much middle of the pack in the SEC. Their offense is outrageous, and it's hard to stop. Jordan just said it a minute ago. Look at all the names he just listed. All those guys are an offensive threat, and they can do it in different ways. You got DJ Wagner, who can penetrate paint at any given point and can shoot the three a little bit. You got Rob Dillingham. You put the ball in his hand, and he does something special. Reed Shepherd can't miss from deep. And then, of course, as he mentioned, you've got Big Z, who's just now stepped onto the floor and, is better than Victor Wembanyama, according to
That's all we need.
All they need. Yeah, all they need, according to Big Blue Nation. So I'm also very much expecting Kentucky to overwhelm Arkansas with offense. So I'm going Kentucky for this one. For those of you who are curious, yes, Kentucky is favored on KenPom 88-81 by 74% in Bud Walton. I'd also pound the over in that game if I was a betting man and put more points down for Kentucky, and I'd imagine they're going 90 plus in this game.
All right, boys, the last one. We've got the Mike White showdown. Georgia heads to Gainesville to face the Gators. Both these teams, since letting go of their last coach, Mike White being one of them, have had their team going in a positive direction. So, guys, what do you think is the most interesting aspect here, and who are you going to go with?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've seen Florida do well is win on the glass. Over 10 points or over 10 rebounds a game better than their opponents. And then also Florida's offense isn't quite to the level of Alabama, but they do take that analytical approach like Alabama does. And they've got a pretty decent offensive rating at 115.8. They're getting better. They're improving as a basketball team over time. The thing is I don't think Georgia's offense can handle Florida's offense. They're sitting down with one of the worst offenses in the SEC in Georgia. They put up 90 points on Kentucky, but also Kentucky's got some defensive problems that they need to figure out and practice right now. So I'm very much on Todd Golden's side in this one, but I hold very much firmly Georgia's going to win a game that you don't expect them to win and find themselves in the conversation at the bubble at some point this season. I like Georgia a lot. They got the talent for a young team, and I think they're going to be fighting for something, but I'm going Florida in this one.
Yeah, Georgia really needs a big game from Abdur Rahim, similar to what he did against Kentucky on the road, because Florida's really good at home. They took Kentucky down to, the last shot at home to start off SEC play. And yeah, Florida's got a really solid offense. They do not shoot the ball well from anywhere. Actually, they 33% 3-point shooters. One of the worst free throw shooting teams in the country at 67%. Home, away, doesn't matter. They're bad wherever they go. So if Georgia's going to win, they're going to need some help from Florida, missing shots and missing free throws, because, like you said, Georgia's one of the worst offenses in the conference, only averaging 76 points per game. And they do play really well defensively, but like I said, they don't have the guys to run with Florida. And they're really going to have to dictate the pace. And doing that on the road is just so hard, especially for a younger team like Georgia. But they really need this win. They need a quad one win like this badly, especially on the road. They're going to get an opportunity here, and they're going to get one next week at home against Alabama. So they really need one of these two. And I feel like probably their best chance will be on the road at Florida, because I think Alabama will probably get them at home. But they'll come in playing inspired. But I think Florida is going to be too up and down for them for Georgia to keep up.
Yep, very much so. Maddie, who you got?
I'm gonna go Florida as well, mainly because of the fact that it's in Gainesville. You know, I think if they were at home, Georgia might give them a run for their money. But like you guys said, if Florida doesn't have the best shooting, but neither does Georgia, I think they're gonna hedge them out and take a home win here.
All right. Yeah, Kim Palm does have this game 83-77, Florida at 73% for anybody who is curious. All right. Feels like we're putting up a united front this week in a lot of our picks. A lot of like-minded thinking this week. But I want to thank Jordan so much for being here today. Jordan, why don't you let everyone know where they can find you, and any last thoughts on this week of basketball we got coming up ahead?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at HarperNation24, and also over on Tide Illustrated, Alabama's affiliate of the Rivals Network. I'm the head basketball analyst over there, as well as the recruiting insider. So I'm always posting stuff about Alabama basketball recruiting, team, season, off season, everything Alabama basketball over on Tide Illustrated. It's SEC play has not disappointed. There has been a lot of really good games and some unexpected results, which always happens in conference play. You see it all around the country, like West Virginia beating Kansas. Results like that is what makes college basketball so much fun, especially during conference play. And SEC is one of the most fun conferences to watch when it gets going. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities for some of these fringe teams like Georgia, Ole Miss, Mississippi State to be able to get some high quality wins on their resume. And, you know, they say it's only January, but these January games count just as much as those in March. So you have to look back at these, and you'll see a lot of missed opportunities for certain teams. But I'm excited for it. Always excited for fresh week of SEC basketball.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. Guys, please go check out Jordan and all the great stuff they're doing over there at Tide Illustrated. That's this week's show. Please like and subscribe to the channel or follow us anywhere you get your podcasts. This is very much still a growing show where we talk SEC hoops. And if you love basketball, we want to have you here. So until next time, we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks, guys. Have a great week.